The Witch in the Woods by T.H. White, Chapter 16. "Look here, Terelivek," they said in the morning. "You will have to tell us another story. Nobody attends to us now, and it's lonely with nothing to do but arithmetic. Will you tell us a story, Terelivek, so that we won't be like that?" The saint was feeling pleased with himself because he had relapsed again. He now found that he absolutely detested St. Paul, and did not agree with anybody about what shape his tonsure ought to be, and he was celebrating his latest heresies with the usual Mountain Dew. He had been singing, "Poteen, good luck to you there." "Sure now," said the saint, "isn't it a fine day to be lonely on, and you no bigger than sitting hens? Tell us the story of how pigs were first made." "Oh, the one," said Agravain, "about how Conan got enchanted on a chair and they couldn't get him off, so they pulled him off, and then they had to graft a piece of sheepskin on his bottom, and the stockings worn by the Fianna were thenceforth made from wool which grew on Conan." "No," said Gawain, "no stories. Let's just sit and talk." It was a snowy day, and all the mountains of Lothian had put on their white mantles. The boys scraped out places in the ditch where Sir Torelevec was sitting, and sat down on their caps to keep dry. He gave them each a sup of poteen to keep out the damp. "What shall we talk about?" said Gareth. "War," said Gawain. "When is our father coming back? I wish my father would come back." "Ah, war's a grand thing," said the saint. "I did be going to wars a great deal one time before I was sainted, only I got tired of them." Gawain said, "I can't see how people can ever get tired of wars. I'm sure I won't. After all, it's a gentleman's occupation, isn't it? I mean, it would be like getting tired of hunting or hawks." "War," said Sir Terelivek, "be a good thing if there don't be too many in it. When there's too many fighting, how would you know what you are fighting about at all? There did be fine wars in old Ireland, but it would be about a bull or something, and every man had his heart in it entirely." "Why did you get tired of wars?" "'Twas them same numbers had them destroyed altogether. Who would want to be killing a mortal for what he didn't understand or for nothing? I took up with the single combats instead." "That must have been a long time ago." "Aye," said the saint regretfully. "Them bullets I was telling ye about now, the brains didn't be much good without they were taken in single combat. It was the virtue of them, you know." "I think I agree with Terelivek," said Gawain. "After all, what's the good of killing all those poor kerns who don't know anything? It would be much better for the people who are angry to fight each other themselves, night against night." "But you couldn't have any wars at all like that," exclaimed Gareth. "It would be absurd," said Gawain. "You must have people, heaps of people in a war. Otherwise you couldn't kill them," said Agravain. "But my dear Pellinore," said Sir Grummore, looking out of the window at the snow, "really, I can't think why you're making such a fuss. If she don't answer your letters, she don't, and there's an end on it." "It's love," said the king sadly. "You feel it here." He pointed to the top of his stomach, somewhere near the solar plexus. "I dare say you do," said Sir Grummore, looking closely at the stomach. "But that's no reason for writing A.B. all day. Look at this Queen Morgoth now. She's in love with the gardener, apparently, but she don't spend the whole day writing A.B. in the potting shed." The queen was not in the potting shed, however. She was having her breakfast in her chamber, with a large sandalwood box over her head, which was supposed to be sovereign for the complexion. It had a small hole in it for putting the breakfast through. The thing to do, she was deciding after sleeping on the problem, was to have a tournament. Gentlemen enjoyed tournaments and became chivalrous at them, particularly if there was a prize. You awarded the prize to the best knight, and he became your preux chevalier, and wore your scarf or something tied round his arm. What could the prize be? Queen Morgoth shrugged her shoulders impatiently and manipulated a piece of fish inside the box. It did not matter what the prize was, so long as it was awarded by herself. No doubt she would be able to turn up something or other in the attic. There was a sort of musical box there, which had never been used. It was called a viol, and this might do quite well. Or there were some remnants from the last charity, red flannel petticoats and so on. Even if the winner of the tournament could not wear these himself, he could give them away to some friend. They would be distinctly useful to almost anybody. The great thing was that they would be awarded by the Queen personally, and this would of course give them a special value. She might make a grateful speech at the prize giving, something about sans pour et sans reproche. And then she would have a night at the tournament, before it even began, her own special night. She would choose Sir Grummore. He could have one of her silk stockings tied round his waist, and he would fight in honor of her to defend it. Obviously a good deal could come of this. Sir Grummore would walk up, all bloody but unbowed, and he would kneel down on one knee in front of her. He would unwind the silk stocking from round his tummy or his neck, or wherever they put them, and he would raise it reverently to his lips. Perhaps he would say that his lips were not worthy to touch it, or something like that. Then she would give him the musical box. There were several pairs of laddered stockings in the attic, so there would be no waste. And after that, could they perhaps join hands and sing a duet together? Something about romance, while all the people clapped? She must find out what the tunes on the musical box were. If there was anything like You Are My Heart's Own Knight, or that lovely one, My Queen in a cramoise gown, they could sing this walking down the steps of the grandstand arm in arm, and the people could join in the chorus. She would have to wear a sequin dress, the clinging one with the long train, and perhaps she could wave an ostrich feather in time to the music. She would bow in all directions. As the witch was bowing from side to side of her boudoir, looking rather peculiar in her box, a frightful thought struck her. It would be impossible to have a tournament because Lot had taken away all the knights. You couldn't have a tournament with only two. Well then, it would have to be a regatta. You had tilting at the water quintain in a regatta, and the greasy pole, and altogether it could be made to be quite like a tournament, if you set about it properly. Perhaps her stocking could be hung at the end of the greasy pole, and Sir Grummore would retrieve it from there, unless he fell off. On the whole, it would be better not to trust the greasy pole. You could have a royal barge rowed slowly down the course. There would have to be boat races, naturally, and the Queen would lie in the back of the barge, being fanned by her ladies-in-waiting. She would carry the gree in her hand. It would still have to be the musical box. And then, when Sir Grummore had achieved it by winning at the water quintain, he would hear her musical laugh ringing across the sunlit water. He would be rowed alongside, and there, kneeling, no, it could be done much better than that. A storm could spring up, or the royal barge could suddenly sink. All that might be arranged later, and there, lo, the flash of pearly arms, the appealing, lovely cry for help. Fortunately, that interfering old fool, her mother, Dame Igraine, had insisted on her learning to swim in Cornwall. How she had hated it, but now it would come in useful. Sir Grummore would dive in full armor, and with powerful strokes make to her side. "Queen, Queen," he would exclaim, "do not leave us like this. The world would be a darker place without you." "Grummore," she would reply. "Grummore, my saviour." The Queen sprang up and began energetically ringing a large handbell, which was answered by one of the ladies-in-waiting. "Fetch Pudsey," cried the Queen, shouting rather so as to be heard through her box. "Fetch Pudsey immediately." When Pudsey arrived, he was the head man of the village, and that was why she had sent for him. Queen Morgause was ready to receive him. She had taken off her headpiece, and was all royal graciousness. "Pudsey," said the Queen, "it is our will that there should be a regatta." "Aye, ma'am." "Get it ready, Pudsey. Get it ready at once." "Aye, ma'am." "And what would this raggedy thing be doing, ma'am, and to please you?" "Tomorrow, Pudsey. No, Pudsey, the day after tomorrow, Pudsey. Do you understand?" The Queen always raised her voice when speaking to the villagers, because they seldom understood her. It seemed better to shout. Pudsey, as usual, did not understand. "Nay, ma'am," said Pudsey, "I canna fully understand ye." Tomorrow, screamed the queen. No, no, the day after tomorrow. A regatta, Pudsey, a regatta. But 'tis the date of winter, ma'am, said Pudsey. 'Tis the date of winter, and nae boat hath put to sea this se'night. Marriage ain't much different to anything else, said Sir Grummore. I've been married to Alice for 30 year. She's a good girl, of course, and nobody could be better at an apple dumpling. But it isn't, well, you don't have to write A.B. about it. Excuse me. When I am married, said King Pellinore in solemn tones, I shall have 4 sons, called Aglovale, Lamorak, Percivale, and Donor. Why, and Donor? Why Donor? Asked Sir Grummore. I don't remember, said the king vaguely, turning away. It really sounded very peculiar. Did you say Donor? Asked the king, turning back. Why should he be called Donor? When the queen had succeeded in driving Pudsey out of the room, the old man had at last got the regatta into his head, all mixed up with the necessity for lifeboats and prayers to the Virgin, and hot spirits to revive the drowned, and life-saving apparatuses and ropes for the spectators to hang on to in the gale. When the queen had finally driven him out with scornful imprecations, she sat down to revise the plan. Idiots! You could never get anybody to cooperate. Well, the regatta was evidently out of the question, but some sort of party she must have, and that a romantic one. It was nearly Christmas time, and of course she could fall back on the usual Christmas festivities, electing of a lord of misrule, and a boy bishop, or abbot of unreason, and playing Harry Racket or Thread the Tailor's Needle. But there was so little scope in this. What was the use of grinning at Sir Grummore through a horse collar, or having a yawning match with King Pellinore? It was chivalry that was needed, something romantic and stimulating, with a bit of pageantry about it. You could not show off too much advantage at Hoodman Blind, but you could, for instance, when awarding the gree at a tilting match. Behind the castle of Lothian and Orkney, deep in the melancholy pine wood from which the queen derived her nickname, there was a dreary stretch of water called Abraham's Bosom. Nobody knew why it was called this, but it was. It was nowhere more than 3 feet deep, in most places only 18 inches. And the still, sad, dark trees came down to the water's edge on every side. There were a few little grebes on it, and occasionally a wild duck pitched on its acre or two of glossy silence, but otherwise there was little else but eels. At present it was frozen. A regatta on the ice, that was it. The queen's head began to whirl with ideas. King Pellinore, the skating beast, tilting at the quintain, sliding at the ring, a sort of Highland games, Sir Grummore tossing the caber, bonfires, regals and bagpipes. She would wear the Orkney tartan with a cairngorm brooch. When Sir Grummore had tossed the caber, he would skate up to her in graceful figures, a sort of love dance, and she would come down from the grandstand amid the skirl of the pipes, with a page behind her carrying the musical box, and Sir Grummore would spread his cloak on the ice so that she should not soil her dainty feet, and then, hand in hand, they would skate off into the distance, while the sun set or something like that. In the ditch outside the castle walls, Sir Terelevec was finishing his story about the creation of pigs. It seems that the Virgin Mary and her son were one day asking alms at a small cottage, and the woman of the cottage turned them away. When the husband came back from work and heard what had happened, he exclaimed, "Do you know which road they took? For that was the Blessed Virgin and her son, all praise be to them." He ran out along the road as fast as he could go, but he was such a fat man, and he ran so fast that pieces of fat flew out of his breath. When he caught up with the Virgin and she told him to go back and collect those pieces and keep them under a pot for a certain time. After 12 days he lifted the pot, and there were 12 little pigs. "Well," said the children. Then they got up, dusted the snow out of their caps, brushed their kilts, and wound their way home, determined to make this piece of interest last out until somebody else told them something. And that's the end of chapter 16.